Hello everybody, it is Nicole from iiKiui, and today we are back with another Monochrome Mermaid. You all seem to like the last one, so I'm continuing it today with the color pink since it was the most requested on the last video. But don't worry, I'll get to all of your color suggestions in the future. So originally I was going to talk about a different subject in a Sketch With Me video, but I wasn't quite sure what to say, so instead we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about my process on painting monochrome mermaids, as well as some of the challenges I faced. Hopefully, sharing my process can inspire some of you to try it yourself, and if you do, I would love to see it, so be sure to tag me on Instagram or Twitter at iiKiui. Before I actually start painting the mermaid, I like to make a quick color composition on my iPad. Usually I just take a picture of the drawing and add colors digitally to figure out my lights and darks. Since the last mermaid had dark hair and light skin, I thought I would try and challenge myself and make this mermaid's skin darker than the hair, just to try different tonal values within the piece. If I stuck with the same tones as the last one, I think the Monochrome Mermaid challenge wouldn't be as challenging. The first thing I do is tape off the edges with washi tape. On this particular watercolor paper, masking tape seems to tear more, so I use washi tape since it's gentle enough to avoid ripping the paper completely. I still have yet to find a tape that doesn't really rip the paper completely, but someone did suggest drafting tape, so I have to look into that. After I tape everything down, I like to do a flat wash of color all over the area except for the eyes. Since I know everything will be at least the first shade of pink, making a flat wash just saves me some time. I suggest doing swatches of the color you're going to use beforehand and practice transparency and water control before adding it onto your art. I think it's important to know how much water to paint you're using and what the color will look like. If you end up painting the entire piece a shade too dark, it's difficult to go lighter once the paint has been placed down. I have a mini tutorial on water control that will be linked in the description and in the eye if you want to learn about it. Creating that range of color from the paint or whatever you're using on a swatch card will give you a better sense of the range of shades you have to work with. I didn't create a swatch card for this drawing, but I find out later that I probably should have. Next, I go a shade darker and color both the hair and skin. Since I know the skin will be the darkest, I like to layer my paints in the beginning because it saves time and helps with creating a flat base color. Lastly, I go a shade darker again and only color the skin since that's the part that will be darker than the rest. I also add in the lips and eye color to be the darkest shade to help them pop. I'm using the Gencraft's watercolor palette for their magenta shade. I personally prefer a more red pink, but since I rarely use this shade of pink that's more magenta, I thought I would stray from what I normally use and give it a try. Also, all the materials I'm using in this video will be listed and linked in the description as always. After all the base colors dry, I start adding in shading. Now, this is where I can start talking about patience and my lack of it. Normally, I'm patient when it comes to people, but waiting for watercolors to dry is another thing. I probably could have used my hairdryer if I really wanted to, but I also found that that tends to warp the paper more, so I haven't been using it. As you can see, it is kind of a gradual process of building the color on top of the base. I go over the same areas multiple times because the paint isn't dark enough, but unfortunately, I didn't really wait for the layer below to dry completely. This is where the problems kind of began. I knew I wanted the end of her tail to be a gradation from a darker pink to a lighter shade, but because I didn't wait for the previous layer to dry completely, it all started to feather out. When I added the iiKiui brush pen, which is basically concentrated ink, I used a lot of water to blend it, and it didn't really help the situation. And to make matters worse, I worked on the hair during the time the tail was drying, so in areas where the tail and hair touched, they bled together. I wasn't able to lift the darker color off from the hair, so I just let it happen. Instead of trying to stop it, I tried to lessen the contrast, so I used a watercolor pencil to shade in areas that needed darkening and attempted to add more dimension within the piece. I tried to stick to the same shade of magenta throughout the piece, and I kept this in mind when choosing other art supplies. When I was adding in more shading and coloring, the lip color also feathered into the face, and when that happened, I kind of panicked a little bit. What I did to remedy that was to blend it into the face as shadow, and then wait for that layer to completely dry before adding in the lip color. You could say at this point, I was starting to learn my lesson. I used the iiKiui pens to color the fins in the foreground. I've been enjoying playing a little with composition, and so far in my recent Monochrome Mermaids, I like to put the fins in the front. I also like adding the effect of transparency to the fins. I think it adds a little bit something extra, and I personally just like how it looks. It did feather quite a bit, but I usually use white gel pen to line the fins, so it ended up covering most of the feathering anyways. I lined the entire mermaid in a pink micron pen, and this definitely gives a different feel than the first one. I think using the color pencil in the previous Monochrome Mermaid helped to keep that soft look, but using a pen and having that bolder line definitely changes the feeling. I'm not really sure which I prefer, but I think both are good options. One of the last things I do is add these scales, and I would normally do it earlier, but to be honest, I just forgot. In order to add the scales, I start in the area I know I want the scales to be darkest, and then I add more water to the watercolors to create an automatic gradient. After the scales are complete, I wait for the piece to dry and then remove the washi tape. This is personally one of my favorite parts because I like seeing the clean edge it creates. On places that the edges aren't so clean, I go over with some white gel pen and that's it. I finish it off with a signature, and that concludes my process on creating Monochrome Mermaids. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it insightful or maybe inspirational. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like this or future tutorials like how to draw flowy hair, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when I post a new video. And if you want more Monochrome Mermaids, please like this video and let me know which color to use in the next one. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. Keep drawing, keep creating, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!